So I finally got around to watching Avengers Endgame. If you have not heard the news, apparently Avengers Endgame was re-released in theaters this weekend because they added extended scenes and a after credit scene. And I thought it was a good time for me to kind of dive in and watch Endgame, because if you have been following me on social media or some of my recent videos, I've kind of mentioned here and there that I have actually caught up with Marvel. It was something that I've kind of been behind on for a long time now, like 8+ years. Like, it's been years, okay? Like, the last, Marvel movie I watched, if I was going back less than a month and a half ago, was like, oh man, like if I'm trying to catch up, was Avengers. I mean, I watched Doctor Strange and stuff here and there, but overall I wasn't caught up. I wasn't watching, Age of Ultron. I didn't watch Civil War, Black Panther, Guardians of the Galaxy. I was not caught up at all. And I just recently got around to actually catching up, and last week I watched Infinity War for the first time on Netflix, and I really enjoyed that movie. I actually was thinking of making a review on it, but soon as I was thinking of doing a review, it was announced that Endgame was coming back to theaters, and so I was like, you know what, I'll save my thoughts on Infinity War Endgame when I get to watch it. So I finally, as you know, I finished it. It came out today, got to go watch it, I just got home, and first impressions overall, I could definitely see how this is like an end of an era. When you look at the end of Endgame, not just because of the title, it's an end of an era for Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's a major end because you have iconic characters that they go out. Like Iron Man, perfect example. The way he goes out, I'll talk about it, but his end within the movie of Endgame, to just Steve, giving up his shield, seeing Captain America give over his shield and seeing how he's aged. There's just a lot of moments throughout the movie that just symbolize that it is the end of the Avengers, the current Avengers that we know of, and it's the next phase, the next part of the series with new characters and probably new Avengers that will form a new team, which is not a bad thing to begin with. It just, I can definitely see why many fans would be very sad with Endgame. I mean, I'm sad, and like I said, I just recently caught up. I can't imagine those that have been watching these movies back to back for all these years up to the point of when Endgame finally released a few months back. So I just can't even begin to imagine. But honestly, one of the things that I really loved about watching the movie Endgame today, I love the little tribute that was added after the credits. That's something that apparently was added with this, movie. I don't know necessarily what was all added or whatever. I'm just gonna be honest. So if you're coming here to wonder what was added within this new re-release, I have no idea, because like I said, I didn't watch the original version of Endgame, so I can't really say what's different. The only thing I know that's apparently different is the tribute scene with Stan Lee, which I want to take a few moments to talk about that. As we all know, something very unfortunate has happened in recent times. The creator of Marvel, Stan Lee, the one that kind of started it all, he passed away, and may he rest in peace. He was a great man. He brought us so many great moments for comic readers to the cinematic universe. He is someone that has brought so many people hours upon hours, hundreds of hours of entertainment to so many people. And seeing, how that tribute scene was done, it was emotional. Like, to kind of get into context, it was basically Stan Lee saying how he can't believe how he's so lucky that, his series, something so small, turned out to be as big as it is, to where he was even able to star as, in his different movies, Iron Man, Captain America, Avengers, etc. He was able to kind of have a show, a little scene with him being, a regular person or something, and he was just very happy to be able to do something like that. And throughout the entire tribute, he's like, I remember all these scenes I've done. I'm so thankful that, these actors, they really put the passion into these characters. The entire tribute scene is just straight up emotional, and I actually had a few tears when I saw that, because it's sad that he won't be able to actually see the continuation of Marvel. He won't ever get to see Phase 4 and Phase 5, etc. of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because He is no longer a part of this world. It's also symbolic that at the very least he got to finish a major act of Marvel. And so I think at the very least that is one good thing we can look at it, is at least his first chapter, the chapter of the cinematic universe, ended off with Stan Lee, and I'm at least happy about that. But the tribute scene, it's emotional, especially with how it ties into the whole We Love You 3000. I got a poster, actually, I showed it on Twitter, where it shows the Infinity Gauntlet that Iron Man made, and you see the Infinity Stones in it, and on the bottom of it says, like, We Love You 3000, and in the tribute to Stan Lee, you have it to where Marvel actually says, Stan, we love you 3000, which is beautiful. It's a really beautiful tribute, because without him, this series wouldn't have even began to begin with, so it says a lot. But okay, I want to get into Endgame and Infinity War. Mainly Thanos. If there's one thing I think that I really have been itching to talk about, it's Thanos as a character. He really fascinates me. His objective to what he wanted, like, you know, how he obtained it in Infinity War, just everything about his character is very fascinating. Now, just to make sure there's a brief FYI, I've never read the comics, so I don't know if the depiction of him in the cinematic universe is the proper depiction or not. However, I'm going with what I've seen from Infinity War and Endgame, okay? Just clarifying. I do know that he has a fascination with death, at the very least. I do know about that when it comes to the comics. I know he likes death and he likes hell or something. I know that. But I'm assuming the depiction in the cinematic universe, he's not really like that. He's more of a good guy, honestly, when you think about what he wants. Like, he's just on the wrong side, and I want to dive into that. I know probably his objective and all that, what he wanted, has probably been dissected by so many people on YouTube and in the community. I know I'm probably not the first to ever tackle it. I know there's just many people that have just broke it down to the very last atom. And yes, I did an intentional reference to Endgame. But I think that at the end of the day, I just really want to talk about it. See, Thanos' goal, he wants to wipe out half of all life. And yes, it would cause a lot of problems. You have example at the end of Infinity War where, you know, these random people that just disappear turn to ash. You have someone that's like in a helicopter, they disappear and they go crashing and all that. And this is obviously happening everywhere around in the universe. And so there's a lot of chaos, a lot of problems that happen. But Thanos was never really worrying about just sentient life. He was worrying about all life in the galaxy, and that's what his objective was. When you think about what he wanted, he stated in Infinity War, there's a finite amount of resources, and because of that, eventually with the, you know, the population, it will grow to a certain point to where, you know, they will consume all these resources and everything will end. And he used his home planet as an example. Now, I know that there's already many people have discussed that with his Infinity Stones, the Infinity Gauntlet, he could create more resources. That is true, he could do it, but it would still lead to the exact same conclusion that he talked about, is that if he adds more resources, then in turn the population will continue to grow, but then it will be even worse to fix. Like, see, he had to kill off half the population just to be able to kind of correct things for the time being, for a limited amount of time. It was a temporary solution, obviously, which I'll get further into that, but he did that, he killed off half because that's all he needed to do. But if he let the population grow and, you know, more food and all that people can consume, more resources, then he might have to kill off, let's say, 3/4 of all the population if he let it continue to grow. So that's the point here, is it would just make the problem worse. The loss overall would be way higher than if he was just to do it straight off right off the bat. So I understand that point. That kind of goes against the entire infinite resources thing. But also someone would argue, okay, so why can't he just keep adding resources? Well, that is true, but you gotta remember one of the big elements to the Infinity Gauntlet and what he even said at the beginning of Endgame. The reason why he destroyed the Infinity Stones to begin with is because they're very tempting. People that are very greedy, people that want power, will be drawn to them and use them for evil intentions, which makes perfect sense. You give someone the power that's basically God to someone, they're going to do some despicable things. So even if you were to pass down this Infinity Gauntlet for generations, there'll come a time to where someone could just snap their fingers and everything ends. And so That wouldn't work to keep a system to keep the Infinity Gauntlet around. That would not. However, Thanos wasn't completely correct with his objective either, wiping out half, because once again, it would lead to the exact same situation to where the population would need to be snapped once again. So, it wasn't a method that would be permanent. He just saved the world temporarily. That's all he did. Which is something that I think, I wish was dived into a little bit more, especially in Endgame, but it's still very relevant. Like, when we think about what he did, okay, at the end of Infinity War, he transcended. Like, he ascended as a god. Like, the opening sequence of Infinity War, you have Loki tell him, you will not become a god. And then Loki, he dies. And at the end of the movie, Thanos legitimately becomes a god. His power and what he's capable of is literally god level. And when you look at what he did, it is also very symbolic. See, he sacrificed his daughter, and he kind of sacrificed himself, like his mental state, his psyche, to save future generations and people that he would never meet or never speak to. That's what he did. See, when you think of a god, sometimes people can think of God as just absolute power, and that's kind of what the Infinity Gauntlet is. But that wasn't the full thing with the ending sequence of Infinity War. Thanos, he went through so many trials and tribulations to get that power, after the sacrifice to get the Soul Stone with Gamora, to what he had to do with wiping out so many people. He had that all on his shoulders. That weight was just now put on his back, and he had to carry it with him for the rest of his life. He had to carry what he did. And in turn, though, he did this not out of anger or vengeance or anything. He did it because he wanted to protect those in the future that are yet to be born. He wanted to protect those that will have a chance if they are given enough time. So Thanos, he sacrificed himself and others just for the future could be happy. He sacrificed the present. So it's, like I said, he became a god in a way. He became very... I don't know how else to describe it but that. That's what he did become. And I think nobody can really disagree with that when you look at it from that perspective. And when you look at his in-game version of, his character, Thanos, it's very different. But it's also, once again, ties in with that message, that theme of how he became a god. See, in Endgame, the Thanos we have at the end, or at the beginning, that dies, that is the godlike Thanos that went through so many trials to obtain his power, and he was willing to accept death. But the Thanos at the end of Endgame that, was having a conquest against Earth was someone that was on the other side of the spectrum. He was someone that never earned that power of the Infinity Stones, the Infinity Gauntlet. He never earned that right to transcend as a god. See, when you think about the legacy of Thanos and what he did to get to Infinity War and how he won, he went through so much. He set up so many things throughout the journey of Marvel Cinematic Universe just to get to that point in Infinity War. And so when you go to Endgame, his character just kind of skips completely over that. He doesn't go through all that effort, all that planning, and everything, the sacrifices to get those Infinity Stones. So in that moment, he was not worthy to hold the mantle of a god. And that's why it really falls to Tony, and why it kind of is a very similar message to what Thanos did. See, Thanos, like I said, he sacrificed his loved one and sacrificed himself and carried that burden to do what he did at the end of Infinity War. And then Tony turns around and pretty much does the exact same thing. He sacrifices his life to save those in the present. Instead of saving the future, he saved the current, the present of humanity and all life in the universe at that time, but not the future. So it's completely opposite from each other. But let's look at the death scenes of Thanos. Like, what happened at the end of Endgame, but then also what happened at Infinity War. When you think about Infinity War's conclusion, the final scene of Infinity War, you have it where Thanos, he walks through his house, and he already said it before, like, that scene happened, that he was going to sit down, look at the sunrise, and smile, and think about how the universe is happy. I know I didn't say the line correctly, but you get my point. And that's what he did at the end of the movie, the first one. He smiled. He looked up in the sky, he sat down, and he smiled. At the end of Endgame, when he realizes that he no longer has the Infinity Gauntlet, he can't use it, and the snap already happened, he sees all his men just turning to ash. He walks, he sits down, and he looks down. And the sun is rising, but he looks down, and he frowns. And then he fades away. It's the exact opposite of his Infinity War version, which once again goes along with how he did not earn that power. So Thanos' character is very interesting. I love his character. I really do. And it also, another reason why he wasn't worthy was that when he was telling Captain America, he's like, I have pillaged, conquered, and just ended so many people on my journey. But it was nothing ever personal. But what I'm about to do to your small world, I'm going to enjoy it. And so it showed that yes, he was a villain in that moment, but once again, because of power and how he was so close to obtaining it, he didn't have to go through that character development to get it. One last thing, I forgot to actually talk about this when I was first recording the video, but it's symbolic that Thanos, when he encounters the Avengers in the beginning of the battle in Endgame, he's like, it led you all back to me. I am the inevitable. And that has a lot of meaning to it. It's not just saying that Thanos is inevitable, but the end is inevitable. Because even if they defeat Thanos, and they did defeat him, the end will eventually come to where they run out of resources and all life will eventually die. So technically, in the end, Thanos kind of will get what he wants, because all life will end, and there might be a possibility it could restart. But yeah, that's something I wanted to add in before, I actually edited this video and finished it. But okay, yeah, I'm done with that. I want to talk about Thanos, because he's a really fascinating character, and I do wonder how his comic book equivalent really is. So let's dive into the in-game scenes, like, the charge and all that. The scene when everybody comes through the portals, and all of the Marvel characters just appear, honestly had me choking up with tears, because I was just thinking about the message of that scene. Obviously, it was for the fans, but there's so much weight behind that moment. Not just because of the cinematography, to the beautiful CGI and all that, the weight to that scene is how many years has been spent to build up to that scene. Not just from Infinity War to Endgame, but you gotta think about where it all started with the original Iron Man movie. That long time ago. The first movie back over a decade ago. Where it all began into where it was in Endgame. And when you see all of these characters that we slowly have grown attached to with their own represented movie just pop up and start defending and build their own army to face Thanos, it's so amazing, because the message behind it, how much love and passion that Marvel has done to make this moment, really just stunned me. It's just rare to see movies do that kind of to me now in this day and age, especially just seeing all that build up behind it. The wait was definitely worth it for that moment. At least it wasn't like Justice League trying to shove characters together that didn't have their proper movie build-ups. And this is what happens when you actually take the time to build up characters for when they finally do join together to face the greatest enemy that they've ever seen. But Tony is a character I think I really want to talk about. Tony's death is also very symbolic. He dies in a way that's so quiet. He goes out with kind of like a whisper, really. He's someone that was always loud, obnoxious, had a lot to say. So much to say throughout his journey throughout Marvel. And his death scene, he didn't have really many lines, but I think it's because of that moment of what really set the tone for that situation and how it really was the end of Iron Man. And when you see the light on his chest go out, it symbolizes that, once again, it's an end of an era. Because this journey of the Marvel Cinematic Universe up to this point has began with Iron Man. So it's fitting that we would end this major chapter within the series with Iron Man's death, when the light goes out. So this movie, I enjoyed it. It was definitely a fantastic journey from start to finish. I'm glad I got around to watching it. I wish I wasn't spoiled as much for Infinity War. People couldn't really help themselves when that movie came out. I can understand it was a really good movie, but I wish I wasn't as spoiled as much as I was. But even then, though, it was still a good movie, regardless of spoilers. Now, Captain America, the only thing I'm disappointed about Endgame is that they didn't show Captain America's journey. Maybe they can make spin-off movies or something, but I have heard that Captain America actually doesn't want to continue making movies. Like, he doesn't want to be a part of Marvel anymore, which is kind of why he gave over his shield, which is sad, really, because I would like more, but I really wanted to see Marvel meet up with, like, Red Skull. I wanted to see that. I don't know why we did not even get a scene with Captain America meeting Red Skull. You would just think something like that would have happened, like returning the Soul Stone, or, just seeing his journey returning all these different stones back to where they began. I would have loved to see that. There could be an entire movie focused on that, but we might not ever get it. But I think I want to leave it at that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.